FOG number 167 is David Shillington. David made his Origin debut in Game 3 of the 2009 series and played 8 games throughout his Origin career. In all, David played in 4 series for Queensland, winning all 4. In a career that spanned 215 NRL games with the Sydney Roosters, Canberra Raiders and Gold Coast Titans, David was also selected to represent Australia in 14 Test matches. In 2010, David was named the Canberra Raiders Player of the Year, receiving the Mal Meninga Medal. David announced his retirement before the start of the 2017 season, succumbing to injury after having played his final year in the NRL with the Gold Coast Titans. Well, David Shillington, thanks for your time. What does it mean to you to be a FOG?
Oh, I probably think back to when I was a kid, right? And which is a long time ago now. But when I was 8, 10 years old, parking myself in front of the TV 15 minutes before kickoff of an Origin game to make sure I didn't miss that kickoff and the opening run of it. Seeing that front rower having to charge or getting to charge it back into the defensive line, and my brothers and I going, man, there's no tougher run than you could do than that. When that defensive line's fresh, pumped up, raring to go, wanting blood, basically, wanting to take someone's head off, and you have to cart that ball back into them. So I remember just watching it with awe back then. And so when I got to run out as a Queenslander, I was thinking about that. Kids at home watching it, I guess the responsibility on your shoulders, the opportunity that you get as well. So what it means to Queenslanders was important to me and front of mind when I think about my time with the Maroons.
Let's go back to the start. Young boy growing up on the north side of Brisbane. Yep. Where did it all begin for you?
I was a good little footy player in my early years, like 7s, 8s, 9s, used to score dozens of tries per year. But, and I say that for a reason, but then in my early teens, I actually had a bad knee injury. And I didn't really progress as fast as I thought I would. I wasn't one of those teenage sensations in the end that made all the rep teams. I made a couple of little rep teams, but I wasn't a teenage sensation at all. But thankfully, I stuck with it and got my opportunities at the end of grade 12 and kicked on from there. But I just loved playing footy as a kid. We played down at Brothers in Stafford there, and that was my local ground, local club. But each afternoon, at home, my brothers and I would be in the backyard bashing each other with the footy. We'd have friends over from school playing in the backyard, and if none of the boys wanted to play with me, I'd be by myself passing the ball in the backyard. I'd put a little target on the side of the house. There's like a brick wall downstairs, the old Queenslander with a brick downstairs, and I put a little target on the wall. I practiced running past it and trying to hit that target. So they're all my memories from playing footy as a young fella.
So when did it get serious for you? You ended up at the Roosters. You said year 12, so in your mind, when did you start thinking that you might be able to, follow a pathway to playing in the NRL and potentially more?
Yeah, so at the end of grade 12, funny how life works out, I got an invitation to trial with the Canberra Raiders. Went down there and played all right in the trial, and they offered me a contract, but it was a little bit too much for me, I think, just to leave school straight away and go down there. The contract was quite small because I wasn't this superstar player or anything, and would have been a fair struggle, I guess, to make that move. And I was looking for another option, and I had Jim Bannigan as a manager at the time, and he rang Brian Canavan from the Roosters, and he was football manager, I think, then BC. And they offered me a scholarship and said, hey, we can't sign you, bring you down, but our feeder club is the Redcliffe Dolphins, not far from you in Brisbane. Do you want to play with them for a year, see how you develop, we might bring you down after that. So obviously I took that opportunity and played at Redcliffe, and that was a real breakout year for me. As I mentioned, I didn't play that well in my mid-teens. I wasn't a superstar or anything by any means. But that year at Redcliffe, playing there, Neil Wharton was the head coach of Q Cup. He debuted me as a 17-year-old playing Queensland Cup. I played about half a dozen games, and for me, that was like the springboard into being a mature, confident sort of player, and then moved down to the Roosters after that.
And what was that like, a young bloke from Brisbane heading down to Sydney?
It was a little bit hectic. Sydney life, obviously a lot more full-on than Brisbane life, but in particular as well with football. So that was 2002 was my first year there, and we won the Jersey Flegg Grand Final. So that was under 20s back then. Yeah, under 20s back then. We won that grand final in '02 for the Roosters, and first grade won the '02 grand final as well. They beat the Warriors. So as a club, the Roosters were on fire. It was a very successful period. And I just happened to play well in the back end of that season. Got picked for the Junior Roos and got extended longer down at the Roosters. So it was a massive, massive year for a bunch of reasons. Not everything went to plan, but after that, unfortunately, I had another knee injury, busted my ACL on the other knee, missed a stack of footy, kept tearing my hamstring, and that sort of extended contract I had sort of fizzled away, and the Roosters said, oh, we probably don't have another deal for you beyond this, which was a big shock to the system after having such a good start to the campaign down there. But I asked them for one more year, and thankfully they gave it to me. And from there, I made my debut in the NRL and kicked on.
Well, 75 games you ended up playing for the Roosters. Looking back now, how important do you think it was for the rest of your career that you are able to battle through those injuries and make a mark at the Roosters?
It's such a classical, you think this is the worst thing that could ever happen to you at the time, and then you look back on it and you go, that was one of the best things that could have happened to me, because I was coming back from a knee reco and doing my rehab, and Ricky Stewart and Ronnie Palmer were the coaches and trainers at the time at the Chooks, and they kind of spoke together and they thought it'd be good for me if I had a bit of a mentor, someone to help me develop in the game. And so Adrian Morley was the lead front rower back then for the Roosters, and pretty fearsome sort of front rower. And he was actually a great athlete as well, very fast, fit, strong. So Ronnie basically instructed me to just do whatever Moz does, whatever Adrian Morley does. Whatever dumbbells he picks up in the gym, you pick up those dumbbells too, Shillo. Wherever Moz finishes in the 200-metre sprints, you're going to be right behind him on his toes, on his heels. So I lifted with him, ran with him, went for coffee, and he taught me so much about training hard and playing tough. And so when I was right to play, went back into reserve grade, but then debuted in the NRL later that year. And thanks to that help from Ronnie, Sticky, Moz, it really set me up to have a solid career from there.
How long did it take you to believe you were an NRL player?
Oh, actually took me a few years, to be honest, because I was always a pretty quiet, introverted bloke, pretty placid generally. And why I say that is because to be a front rower, to be in the NRL, you got to bring the aggression, right? You got to be confronting and dominating. And it's a coach's worst nightmare to have a big player who's not aggressive. But that was actually probably me in my early years. A big turning point for me was when Brad Fittler took over as coach at the Roosters. And Freddie, as most people know, thinks out of the square. He explains things differently, has different viewpoint often. And that helped me a lot. And he spoke to me a lot in that year. So that was like the back end of '07 going to '08. And that's when my career went from a bit of a plateau to a bit of a jump up again. He spoke to me about my role as a front rower and being competitive, dominating to get our team on the front foot, quick play the balls, dominating defence to slow them down and give our team's defensive line to get set. He spoke to me a lot about those mechanics of the game and how I could play a good role for my teammates. So I guess I started to see that responsibility and my opportunity to make a mark on the game and the team. And from there, I started playing much more aggressive footy, much more competitive, and that ultimately was good for my career.
2009, obviously a pivotal year when you make your debut for Queensland, but you made it at the Canberra Raiders. How did you go from Bondi to Canberra?
Yeah, well, the back end of '08, I got to be 18th man for the Maroons, their last game. So got a little taste of camp there while it's Queensland camp, and knew I was getting close, but wasn't quite there. And the move to Canberra helped me a lot. At the Roosters in '08, the Roosters just bought Mark O'Mealy, Willie Mason, Milesy, like a couple of really good forwards. And I was getting game time, but I wasn't getting heaps of game time starting. I wasn't starting the team most weeks. So going to Canberra, there's a big opportunity for me to be a starting front rower, a bit more of a leader of the pack if I played right, and I wanted to take that opportunity. It's funny how life works, because like moving to Canberra, a lot of people are like, oh, isn't it boring and cold down there? You're not going to like it. But I was going there for footy, and I signed an initial 4-year deal thinking I'd just go there for 4 years, do my time, so to speak, see how I go, and then maybe go overseas and play for the Catalans or something cool like that. That was my mindset at the time. But I was mistaken. Hey, I loved Canberra. Not only was it good for my footy, but I got married there, had my kids. It was a quiet life. We're off the radar, so to speak. So I ended up spending 7 years there. I extended 3 years beyond that initial 4. And footy-wise, lifestyle-wise, it was a wonderful move for me.
Well, I think it's fair to say that if you didn't make that move, you may not have played for Queensland, even though you're 18th man, your game time was just diminishing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have represented your country. So let's go back to 2009, that you were named in I think it was the 25-man squad. Shillo, what was it like when you got that call to play for Queensland?
Oh, look, I don't want to sound cliche by saying it was a dream come true, but it really was. It really was. I was fairly close the year before, of course, when I mentioned I was 18th man, and just getting that close, getting a bit of a whiff of it, so to speak, it makes that fire burn a lot more. So thankfully I didn't have to wait too long, really. It was another 12 months, but to get the goal to go in was just sensational. It came with a bit of like self-doubt, of course, as well, where I was playing good footy. I was a good NRL player, but comparative to this Maroons team, I wasn't that good, so to speak. So that Maroons team had just wrapped up their 4th series in a row. They have some all-time greats in there that, future immortals. So whilst I was really excited, I also had a bit of fear and self-doubt maybe that, will I be up to it? So but what really struck me about that playing group was there was just no egos or anything like that. Like they're the biggest name players, highest profile, highest paid, however you want to talk about it like that, in the highest achieving in the game. But they were doing it all for Queensland, not for themselves. And they welcomed you in with open arms. They explained to you the role that you have to play as a Queenslander. Big Mel gives you that confidence that you can do it, and the intent that you should do it, and should do it with everything you got. So super exciting, bit of self-doubt. But that Maroons culture really helped me a lot.
Take us back to that first game. A long day, they say, around the hotel. Then the game was not till 8 o'clock, and you're starting on the bench. What goes through a debutante's mind in the lead up to that first game?
Yeah. Oh, look, generally preparing for any NRL game, you try and do the right thing. You have your little routines where you try and sleep in just a little bit longer if you can. You wake up and you try and hydrate a bit more than usual, and so on. Eat a pretty healthy meal. You get together as a team and do some activation type activities and that sort of stuff. But then when you're doing it at Origin level, you're kind of thinking to yourself, should I do a bit more of this, a bit more of that? Should I do anything differently? And so there's a little bit of stress, a little bit of excitement. But I was never one to sleep before games anyway. I try to have a lay down and just close all the curtains and make the room cold and almost hibernate in there a little bit, not more than anything else. But I wasn't very successful with sleep because of the excitement, I guess. And then, as you said, long day, and you kind of get a little bit tired by the end of the day because game's at 8 o'clock. But then that excitement kicks in, the adrenaline, the atmosphere of the game itself, the responsibility you feel as well. So, very exciting. Little bit of nerves, of course, and very, very long day, as you said.
Can you remember standing on the touchline waiting to get on?
Yeah. You watch the game pretty closely because you're looking for, I guess, how will you slot into the game? What do you need to do? And you're sort of weighing it up. Who's defending well? Who might you run at? What are the sets looking like? Where they're hitting on the field? How would you play with that? So you want to get on as quick as you can. It was nice to come off the bench and when they're a little bit tired as well, but that makes it a little bit easier for you. I know starting the game in future games is a whole bunch harder, that speed of the game. But just excitement and looking for your opportunity, really.
Quickest games you've ever played?
By far. That's the difference, I reckon, with NRL to Origin is speed and intensity generally. There's no in the NRL today, 2024, there's not many weak players out in the field. But back then, in 2009, 10, 11, there was the odd player that probably had a fair few weaknesses in the NRL. But then you come to Origin, it's the best of the best, of course. So there's no weaknesses. Everyone's a danger player. everyone can run, everyone can hit, pre-line, post-line pass. So, yeah, the intensity ramps up enormously.
It must have given you great confidence in one respect, though, to look around and see who else was wearing that maroon jersey to make it a little bit easier for you.
Yeah, it's bizarre to talk about all the big names. Looking back for decades to come, they'll always be considered some of the all-time greats, those players. And it's kind of cool because when you're playing at different clubs, you watch these players at different clubs, like a Darren Lockyer, for example, and you sort of admire them from afar and sometimes wonder what it'd be like to play with them. Similar with coaches as well. You kind of watch these coaches at other clubs and you go, I wonder what they kind of know, what they do that my current coach or other coaches don't know and do, etc. You know, so a bit of like intrigue maybe. Yeah, when you're in a way, it's kind of easier when you play with those players because they all just do the right thing most of the time. So then it just comes back to you, the emphasis on you, make sure you play your role, make sure you do the right thing, and everything should work out okay.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, you made your debut in Game 3 of that series, a long time before the next series. You've had a taste. What were your thoughts all that time? Oh, I'd love another crack, love another crack. Did that not so much weigh on your mind, but did it motivate you?
It was good I didn't have any more games to come, actually, because in that game I actually tore my pectoral muscle. And I think it was Anthony Watmo, I can't remember exactly now. He ran at me and I stuck my arm out a little bit too far. It wasn't the correct tackling technique. And that awkward position just put a tear in my pec. So I actually missed a few games after that for the Raiders. And I felt like that burning tear sensation that you get. But I wasn't going to come off or anything for Queensland. Not that I'm trying to be a tough player or anything, but I just wanted to stay in there as long as you can because, as you know, like there's only 3 games per year. You might actually only get picked in 1 game that year or ever as well. So you certainly don't want to leave the field if you didn't have to. But yeah, I was pretty sore and busted for a couple of weeks after that. So I like the rest, but certainly look forward to the next series.
Did it make you a better player playing Origin?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Funny, coming back from Origin, your intensity is so high. One of the most memorable games was for club level, just for this reason, in this context, was in the 2010 series, came back after one of the Origin games. We played the West Tigers at Leichhardt. It was a Sunday afternoon. Origin was obviously Wednesday night prior to it. And I was so gassed from that Wednesday night. My legs were heavy, walking around, going up a small flight of stairs, broke me. I thought, how can I play a game of footy? I can't even walk up a flight of stairs. But then I got into the game and ended up getting man of the match because the intensity that I was bringing from the Wednesday night was just there naturally. And I just found like I could just push through the pain easier and everything was in a bit more slow-mo compared to the Wednesday night. So yeah, it definitely made me a better player, and I think it was mostly around speed and intensity.
Played 8 games, Origin games, across 4 series, of which Queensland won every series.
Yep.
What memories do you have of that side and that time, the fact that it just seemed that every time there was an Origin series, Queensland was going to win, and the mindset of those players around you?
Yeah. Confidence was obviously high, but it was also combined with don't get complacent. Because people would say things like, it's probably worth New South Wales winning a series to keep it interesting, right? And we'd be like, there's merit to that point, but not on our watch, eh? Not on our watch. So ultimately they did win after, was that 2014? Maybe they might have won again. But up until 2013, yeah, we wanted to keep winning and winning and winning. So the confidence for that team, right, was twofold in that the everyone was just so motivated, I guess, that they knew it was more than just about them. And how the Maroons management did that really well, in my opinion, is they took the team to a regional part of Queensland each year, and they still do that today, of course. I think they've been in like Warwick and Cairns and stuff the last couple of years. In my year, we went to Roma and a couple other places. And when you get to go to those regional towns, sort of off the map a little bit, you get to see just how much it means to people in those towns for you to pull on that Maroons jersey and play your guts out for the state. And it does provide this extra bit of motivation, I reckon. So there's that part of it. But then just that team over those years had the most incredible players. And just speaking about a few key players like that most teams, most listeners would know, Smithy gets to go right or left. He's got Cooper on one side and JT on the other. So starting with those two, either option, fantastic. Then one of them's got Hodjo out one side, the other guy's got GI out the other side. And if those options aren't good enough, you've got Billy at the back. So just thinking about stuff like that, let alone those second rows, props, wingers, etc. We were just spoiled with talent who, as I said, were highly motivated.
Mm. Where do you put? You've represented your country as well as you spoke about before. Being able to play for Queensland and running out to Lang Park in front of a home crowd, where does that rate for you?
Oh wow, yeah. Some people ask that question similarly around playing for Queensland versus playing for Australia. Yeah. What's a bigger honour? And it's a really hard one to answer because I'm a massively proud Queenslander, but massively proud Australian too.
Yeah, I didn't want to ask you to try and pick between the two. I just wanted, what you thought or what was going through your mind running out for Queensland at Lang Park.
Well, where I was going is to say that both of them are massive honours, and they're a bit slightly different, and it's really hard to put into words. But the way Queensland gets behind the Maroons, as in the state of Queensland, the people here, the businesses, the way they get behind it is so special, so special. And I used to know that probably potentially more than others that lived here, because I lived in Canberra for a long time, of course. Because the way I got to know it is, living in Canberra, people didn't get into Origin that much, of course. Living in Sydney when I was there, people got into Origin a little bit, but it wasn't very obvious, I guess, because big city, big city. But then me coming home to Brizzy to see my mates, my family, over all those years in our bye rounds or the off season, seeing how much everyone loves Queensland, that loves the Maroons up here in Queensland. I think I kind of got to know that better than other people because I lived away for so long. So playing at Lang Park, representing Queensland, knowing how much it means to the whole state, genuinely, I think it's such a special experience.
Out of those 8 games, is there a favourite memory? One moment that stands out, or is that too hard a question?
Oh, it's a tough one, but I could say period of time maybe. The 2010 series, we won that one 3-0, which is pretty rare, as you know. And I remember Lockie speaking to us before Game 3 and saying, boys, in his coarse voice, boys, yes, boys, this is an opportunity that won't come around very often. And you will look back on and regret it if you don't take this opportunity. There'll be a lot of game series where it's 1 apiece and you got to seal it, but there won't be many where it's 2 to us and you get to get the clean sweep. And so, I was listening clearly to that, and I wanted to win desperately. I know all the boys did too. So to win that series 3-0, I think that was probably a special period, especially because we just kind of, I don't want to say we did it easily because that would be pretty disrespectful to the Blues. But what I mean is the Game 3, we won it. We threw the ball around a lot. We're kind of loose with how we played, and we still got by. So, as I said, just a very talented team and came together in a special way.
You spoke earlier about the injuries as a young man when you went to the Roosters and overcoming those and the impact that had on your career.
Yep.
Fast forward to the end of the career, you come home to Southeast Queensland, you sign with the Gold Coast Titans hoping to finish on a high, and sadly injuries come again, almost the full circle. How difficult was it for you not to end your career the way you wanted to?
It's a very difficult decision. And look, footy is a brutal sport at the top end, right? And charging that ball into the line time after time, things go wrong. And so I had 10 rounds of surgery by the end of my career. Both the knees recode, plus another round of surgery for them. My shoulder done twice. Got plates put in my hand. They got smashed to pieces and so on. So, look, I didn't go by unscathed. And by the back end of my career, that sort of just had crept up for me, I guess. So whilst mentally I wanted to keep playing, and I know it sounds foolish, but I was like, man, my career's cut short. But I was already 33 and played a couple of hundred games, so it's a bit foolish to think that. But I did. I wanted to keep playing for sure. I was starting to, I guess, not be up to playing first grade at the Titans there. I just couldn't keep up really, like in a meaningful way. I spoke to Neil Henry actually at the time about potentially playing overseas instead, because he was the coach of the Titans. But I always remember I had these conversations with a couple of the coaches over there about coming over, and they had offered me, the UK coaches, Super League, and they'd offered me a 1 or a 2 year deal, a bunch of different clubs. And I thought, well, I've got 2 young kids and I'm married. I thought, if I'm going to uproot the family and go over there, I'd like to do it a bit more long term. And so I asked him for a 3 year deal. I said, oh, if you give me a 3 year deal, I'll come over to whichever club it is. I love that security. But he goes, oh, look, Dave, I'd like to, but heaps of Australian players come over here, and we signed them for a 2 year deal. 2 games into the first year, they're injured and we have to pay them out. So, and when he said that, I thought, you know what? That's going to be me. I've been hanging on by threads here. And whilst I probably could have played at Super League level compared to NRL, because there is a bit of difference, of course, I don't know if my body would have held up, and I would have wasted their time, the fans' time, my time as well. It's not a good feeling to be injured on the sideline. And so ultimately, if I couldn't play in the NRL, I wasn't going overseas, I had to hang up the boots. So it was a bit of a slow retirement. The sort of conversation around this happened over several months. And then one day, the Titans rang me up and said, you know, can we finalise this and get it done? Because I think they wanted to sign someone else at the time, which is totally fine. And so I signed off for my retirement, and that was it, which is a weird feeling.
But how'd you cope?
You know, it's I actually remember the next morning how weird it is, because like every morning you'd wake up and you have your kit bag in the corner of the room, and it had your boots and mouth guard and everything. So you'd wake up, grab your kit bag, a couple of fresh sets of training gear, towel, have a coffee and go off to training. And when you're at training, you see all your mates really, and you have fun. You train hard, but you love that. But then all of a sudden you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, what do I do now? You don't like walk into a job straight away. And I looked at my kit bag and I went, oh, I don't really need that anymore. Do I like throw it in the bin? I don't throw it in the bin straight away, do I? I might just keep it for a while for no particular reason, so I don't make any rash decisions. And I had about probably 4 or 5 months of no work, because I had to have some extra surgery to just tidy up things back into my career. But after about 4 or 5 months, I was ready to kick on and make new movements in life. And thankfully, got a job with the NRL actually, delivering their mental health program for the community, which I loved. It really reignited my passion for footy, to be honest, because the back end of your career, you do get a bit burnt out a little bit. Not resentful, but you're a bit tired of footy with all the injuries and so on. And then working with the NRL, Men of League Foundation, who are called, I think, Family of League now.
Family, yeah.
Yep. Working with them really reignited my love for footy, actually. So, yeah, it wasn't a tough retirement in many ways, and I'm really glad things worked out the way they did.
Who had the biggest influence on your career?
I'll probably give a shout out to probably family first, and then work stuff. My broader family, like mum and dad, always gave me every opportunity that I could get, right? So we lived a pretty simple life growing up, but never went without opportunities. So they fed us healthily. They didn't let us watch TV all night. Unfortunately, we thought it was child abuse at the time, but looking back on it, so glad that they were like what we would call strict parents. It was, you know, sausages, potato, and frozen peas most nights for dinner, which we were like, oh, why can't we have Maccas like my friends? But yeah, once again, so thankful they were like that. My brothers as well, they were very good footy players as well, and very supportive. But then from a work point of view, going to the Roosters with Arthur Beetson there and Brian Canavan, both sensational people who were big influences on my career. Beetso, just I lived with him for a couple of weeks in Sydney when I first moved down, just to help with that transition. And he was just this wonderful, like empowering, inspiring sort of bloke that I really appreciate having in my corner. And Brian Canavan, he was just a footy ops manager or something like that at the time, who went on to be CEO. But he was a wonderful supporter of mine and really fair good person to deal with. So, yeah, from family to footy, wonderful people all around.
So finally, looking back, now that you are retired and you can reflect on your career, what do you reckon the 7-year-old boy at Brothers there would think if someone told him that you're going to play over 200 NRL games, you're going to play 8 Origin, you're going to play 14 Test matches for Australia? What do you reckon he would have thought, and what does the man now think about his career looking back?
When I was 7, I don't reckon we knew much about playing footy, because I actually do, similar to your question, I actually remember being about 12 or 13, which is like mid-90s, early 90s, when footy kind of went full-time, professional then. And I remember reading about it in the paper, actually. My younger brother would have been about 10, I reckon. And I said, hey, I was just reading, did you know that there's people who play footy for a job now? Like, they get paid just to train and play games. They don't do anything else. That is hilarious. Imagine if you got to do that. So I remember reading it at the time, but not thinking you'd ever do it, right? So yeah, it's pretty weird to think that you would be that person in another 5 years' time or something. But yeah, reflecting on my career now, look, there's lots of things I'd do differently, for sure. I think there's lots of things at the back end of your career you wish you knew at the start. That's for most people in life, of course. But in saying that, overcoming some of the injuries, the setbacks, poor choices, things like that, has shaped who you are as a person, who I am as a person. So things that you thought were terrible at the time have turned out to be a blessing in disguise. So I think most players, not just myself, who've had to continuously come back from an injury, from poor form, things just not going their way, deal with criticism and tiredness, fatigue, new challenges, the evolvement of the game as well. So people have had to deal with that. It sets them up to deal with almost anything in life now. So really thankful I went through all that and got to experience it all.
Well, David Shillington, thanks for your time and congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching this episode of the FOGS Queenslander podcast. If there's a FOG you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.